Hi guys, in this video we will be talking about where is better to live in Ontario or Quebec. So if you move into Canada and you're choosing between two provinces, between Quebec and Ontario, there's some differences that you should consider. Some of the biggest differences are these. Language. Canada has two official languages, English and French. Well, it really depends where you live. So, for example, if you live in Ontario, there's a big chance that you won't need and won't have to use French if you know it. There are no requirements to know French for living in Ontario. At the same time, if you only speak French, living in Ontario could be very hard for you. Because as by default, people in Ontario speak English and there's not much services provided in French. So, for example, if you go to the bank and you speak only French, you would probably have some issues because there's a big chance that nobody in this bank, in this location, in this branch, would be speaking French, so you won't be able to speak with people there. Or, for example, if you go to the store, regular store, there's a big chance that people will be speaking English only. Especially if you go to rural areas in Ontario, there's going to be an issue for sure. In some establishments, like government establishments or some government services, they should have somebody who would accommodate you if you speak only French, because it's mandatory to have somebody to help you if you don't speak English and you live in Ontario. The story is different in Quebec. So you need to speak and understand French if you're gonna live in Quebec, especially if you're gonna live in small town or rural areas. There's a big chance that people won't be speaking English there at all, or would know barely English there. We moved to Ontario and we live in Ontario, but we often travel to Quebec and we have friends there in Quebec, so we know more about these two provinces. Many times when we were driving through rural areas in Quebec or small towns and we were going somewhere like to the store or to the restaurant or even to get the gas for our car, we encountered people who didn't speak English at all. We were trying to remember our French, they were trying to remember their English, and it was like really funny conversation that we were having, but that's the reality of living in Quebec. You have to understand that. If you don't know French, if you can understand French, if you can't speak French, you won't be comfortable living in Quebec. If you're planning to live in Montreal, there's a different story, because Montreal is more like a bilingual city, and people who live in Montreal, they mostly can speak both languages. They can speak easily French or English, but still, most schools there are French schools, despite the fact that Montreal is like a big city with people speaking both languages fluently. You still will feel the pressure from the society, from the atmosphere, you still will be getting those vibes and pressure to speak French. For social help, Quebec is a better province. If you need to apply to welfare or some social help, you would get more when you will living in Quebec. There are more help to people, to new immigrants, in order to settle down, to learn French. There's some program the government help you buy your first house. If you want to buy first house, they will help you with down payment. Also, it's not going to be like expensive house, but still that could be like a condo or house that you can buy with some government help as well. Montreal, Quebec City, they are more interesting cities in terms of architecture. They have more European vibe. Montreal is like a mix between New York and Paris. There are some parts of the city that will remind you Paris. There are some parts of the city that might remind you New York. And that's a very beautiful mix. Very nice city to walk, to have some fun, to have some pleasure even when you're walking. Versus Toronto, they don't have that much. Very nice city, but it's more like a North American city, and Montreal is more like European city or mixed with North American and European city. Old Quebec is just an incredibly beautiful place to live, to have some fun, to have some very nice vibes. And we really love those two places, those two cities. But again, in order to enjoy it, you don't necessarily have to live there, because again, if you're gonna live, for example, in Montreal, there's a chance that you're not gonna be living in downtown. There's a chance that you'll be living somewhere outside of town or some residential areas, and you won't be seeing the old part of the city that much. Whether you can be living in Toronto and you can be visiting Montreal or Quebec as much as you want. And it's also very good thing that what we do, that what we love, that why we love to go there to Quebec City or Montreal, to just feel a little bit of European vibe, to have some fun, to walk through those beautiful streets of old Quebec, or old Montreal. Even rural areas in Quebec, when you be driving through some small towns or small places, you will see there are some beautiful houses, more like French style kind of houses, more like European style kind of houses, and it's also very nice vibe, interesting and good to see. There you have it. When we visit in Montreal and I'm driving through the Montreal streets, I always get scared, because the driving style in Montreal particularly is more aggressive than in Toronto. Even Toronto downtown could be aggressive too, but it's still different for me. I feel more pressure when I'm driving around Montreal. Housing is cheaper in Quebec. Just for example, the average apartment rent in Toronto is about $1,500 Canadian, while in Montreal it could be just like $900 per month. I'm not talking about renting house or renting condo. That's the prices for apartments. But if you want to buy something, prices are much cheaper in Montreal, in Quebec, than in Ontario or Toronto. Toronto is one of the most expensive cities in Canada, just under Vancouver a little bit. Prices are crazy here. Housing prices are crazy. If you want to buy a house here, if you want to buy condo here, it's just a lot of money you have to make, a lot of money you have to save in order to get down payment, in order to get into housing here. Whether in Quebec it's easier, but the pay is a little bit less in Montreal. In Quebec, you will get a little bit more money in Toronto than you will get in Montreal. This the situation, so you have to consider that as well. And taxes are much higher in Quebec than in Ontario. So for example, if you would pay like $16,000 in income taxes, with the same income you will pay $20,000 in income tax in Quebec. So it's a big difference. Taxes are higher in Quebec, and that's what you have to keep in mind as well. Sales taxes are also higher. When you buy a car, when you buy furniture, when you buy groceries, wherever you buy, you pay sales tax, not on every product, but most of the products you are paying sales tax. And in Ontario, they are 13% on top of the price that you see in the store. In Quebec, it's almost 15%, so it's also higher. That's you have to consider as well. And if you're buying something large, for example, if you're buying a car, you will feel the difference between these two numbers. Education is similar, I would say, and they both Toronto and Montreal, they both have great universities. McGill in Montreal is amazing university, ranked very high in the world, and University in Toronto as well is the #1 university in Canada, and it also has a very high ranking in the world. But the education itself is cheaper in Quebec. If you live there, prices for you would be cheaper than even for person who lives in Ontario and wanna study in university in Quebec. That person would pay more than person that lives in Quebec. And some cultural differences as well. People in Quebec, being descendants of French colonizers, they still have some bond to the French culture. It became something new, something different, but it's clearly different than culture in Ontario. So people who live in Quebec, they they have a little bit different lifestyle, a little bit different approach to life than people who live in Ontario. To summarize this video, I would say that if you want to pursue a career, get a good job, buy a house, develop business, building your life financially, Ontario probably would be a better option for you. With some, you would have pay more for housing or some other stuff, but the thing is that there's a chance that you will build something as well. If you like business oriented person, or if you're like career oriented person, the Ontario province could be a better option for you. But if you want to live more relaxed life, have more quality life, more personal development, more activities, Quebec might be a better option for you in this case than Ontario. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this was helpful for you. If you guys have any questions, ask me in the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.